So Star Wars. Greetings humans, welcome back to Sci-Fi Punks, where we like to talk all things sci-fi, movies, comics, video games, novels. If it's sci-fi, then I want to blab about it. And today I finally want to get Star Wars out of the way, at least a portion of the massive universe of content that has been thrust upon us in the last 10 years or so, thanks to Disney. I want to just stick to the Disney Plus streaming series that they have produced about Star Wars, starting in 2019. I want to go through each of them and kind of just give my thoughts about what I think about them. I am currently a disillusioned Star Wars fan. I grew up in the 90s when Star Wars was still really awesome. There was only the 3 really cool movies and then a bunch of really sick video games and comic books to enjoy. And since then, since the prequels have come out, it's just been such a complicated topic. If somebody asks you the question, if somebody asks anybody the question if you are a Star Wars fan or not, the answer is always, it's complicated. I remember being a kid and going to the CD store, being like a teenager and buying like a punk rock album, and they would typically have like 21 songs on them because each of the songs are really short, so they could stuff a bunch of songs onto a single CD. And I would end up going home and only liking, 7 of the 21 songs. Then I'd wonder to myself, is this a good album or not? I only like 7 out of 21 songs, so can I say this is a good album? If it was only 10 songs and I liked 7 of them, then yes, that's a damn good album. But now I have this conundrum where I'm wondering, is this a good album or not? Because I don't like most of it. And I kind of feel like a lot of us have the same feeling when it comes to something like Star Wars. There's just so much content to pick from, and so much of it is not to our liking, and so now we wonder if we're even fans anymore. But I digress. I'm just going to go through each of the shows, starting with the ones I liked the least, and then work my way up to the ones I liked the most. The worst Disney Plus Star Wars show, in my opinion, is easily Obi-Wan Kenobi. Holy moly, Obi-Wan Kenobi is kind of where I lost hope. I was a holdout for a long time when Disney bought the franchise. I found things to like about all of their movies that they put out, like all of the sequel trilogy movies. I found ways to enjoy all of them to a degree. And so I was like a holdout fan for a long time. But then when this show, Obi-Wan Kenobi, was my breaking point, where I was like, I don't even know if I want to watch this to the end anymore. So for a long time, fans had been pining for Ewan McGregor, who played Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequels, to return and do a solo movie. That fans wanted them to make a solo film about Obi-Wan Kenobi starring Ewan McGregor about his time on Tatooine. And I kind of felt like I was the only person who did not want to see this. I never thought that this was an interesting topic. First of all, I don't really think Obi-Wan Kenobi is that interesting of a character. He serves his purpose very well in the original trilogy as Luke's mentor, but beyond that, I think he's kind of a pretty boring character. And hot take, I don't think Ewan McGregor is a very good actor, and I don't think he does a good job in this role. I know that's probably going to get me murdered by somebody eventually, but I really believe that. I think that Ewan McGregor is as wooden and stiff as Hayden Christensen is in the role of Anakin Skywalker. I think Ewan McGregor is actually a pretty bad actor a lot of the time. No offense to the guy, but I don't find him believable at all. I think all his readings are really wooden and stiff. And he does the Obi-Wan inflections. He does a pretty good Obi-Wan impression a lot of the time, or a good Alec Guinness impression. But beyond that, he's not really a believable actor. And I don't really feel drawn into his moments on screen. So yeah, I was not stoked about this show off the bat, but I wanted to give it a chance because Deborah Sow was the director of it, and she directed, in my opinion, some of the best episodes of The Mandalorian show, so I was on board to see what she could do with a whole show about Obi-Wan. And right off the bat, one of my biggest criticisms about this show is one that a lot of people share, is that it was obviously supposed to be a movie that they stretched out into 6 episodes, and that's really obvious when you watch the show. I'm going to say this right now, though, I think this is a problem with all of the Star Wars Disney Plus series. They all are way too drawn out and stretched out. I think almost all of them could just be movies. But Obi-Wan Kenobi especially so, because It just doesn't have much going on in it. The story of Obi-Wan Kenobi's life on Tatooine between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy has never sounded like an interesting concept to me, and I think the writers also thought so. So they had to do a lot of canon-breaking things to make it interesting, like have him fight Darth Vader and hang out with Princess Leia. I might as well get to the character of Princess Leia. I don't remember the name of the actress that plays her, the little girl, but she sucks. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't think she does a good job in this role. I believe that there are lots of great child actors out there that do a good, convincing job, but I don't think that she's one of them. And I also don't think that the character of Leia is written very well. She's so cliche. There's her introduction scene where she's getting ready for some royal ceremony, and she's got servants dressing her up and getting her up and dressing her up in all these fancy clothes. But then it turns out she runs off to the woods because she's just like too much of a wild child to be involved with any of the politics. She just wants to climb trees, and so it does this hard cut to her running through the woods and being a crazy little girl. And it's just like, oh, we have seen this plot time and ever since The Little Mermaid in 1989. We have seen this particular character, the young girl that just doesn't want to be bound to the rules of her society and wants to do her own thing. It's just really eye-rolling and cheesy. And I also think, like, a lot of people will say, well, this is in character for Princess Leia, because the way that Carrie Fisher plays her in the original trilogy is she is very fiery and wild, and this is kind of keeping to her personality. I feel like that's so surface level. That's such a surface level critique, because nobody has the same personality that they did when they were 10 years old. Princess Leia should have grown through this show. She should have started off as a timid little girl, like a real little girl, and then the events of the show should have turned her into the character that she eventually becomes in A New Hope in the original Star Wars trilogy. But they had the writers had no imagination for this, so they had to just make her basically a little 10-year-old version of what you saw in the original trilogy. Just the same character, but tiny. But most of all, Princess Leia should not be in this story. There should be no Princess Leia in the Obi-Wan story. It's so obvious that in the original trilogy, Princess Leia had no interaction with Obi-Wan Kenobi. She would have mentioned something about how she went on a wacky whirlwind adventure with him to Luke Skywalker at some point in the original trilogy, if that had actually happened. But alas, they just expect you to ignore that and just go with what's going on in this show. It just breaks the lore for me and takes me right out of the whole thing, and it drives me crazy. The other lore-breaking problem that a lot of people point to is how Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader fight in this show a couple times, actually, and it's kind of implied in the original trilogy that when they meet in the original trilogy, it's the first time that these two characters have seen each other since Darth Vader first fell to the dark side. And this Obi-Wan show basically says, no, they actually met a couple times and actually duked it out a little bit. I see this plot hole. It doesn't really bother me that much, because the only shining light in this show, the one good thing that brings it up a couple points from a 0, in my opinion, a 0 out of 10 to a 3 out of 10, is the final battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. It's really good. You could tell that all of the imagination and inspiration went into that last battle in this show, because it is really good. It almost saved the show for me, but there was too much bad that had come before it that it doesn't save the show. But it is really great, that one fight, and the fight is so great that I can forgive it for sort of creating a bit of a continuity error with the original trilogy. The show also looks really cheap. I think a lot of people have brought this up. There's something about this show that just looks really, I don't know, like TV movie. Like, it just doesn't look very expensive, even though it was expensive. The cinematography has that really uninspired, kind of clinical look about it that is kind of reminiscent of the prequels, actually. If anything, this show is a pretty good companion piece to the prequel Star Wars trilogy, because it has the same sort of boring cinematography about it. It kind of looks like a prequel, one of the prequel movies in some spots, just by the way that it's shot. But yeah, overall, I give Obi-Wan Kenobi a 3 out of 10. I think it's actually a really bad show. I think it's boring and stupid and kind of insulting to Star Wars fans in a lot of ways. So I'm going to come down hard on it. Really didn't like this show.